Mother claimed she raised us after the divorce, but I was the child who cooked, cleaned, and parentified myself. At my shower, I exposed her lies. I'll keep this simple, with no fancy breaks or pretty headings, because I wanted to read postings like the ones I see here, where people lay out facts and seek judgment or advice. My parents divorced when I was 6 years old, and the way time was divided after that set the tone for all that came after. My father managed finances, school papers, pickups and drop-offs, and maintained consistent routines. I spent a lot of time with him doing things like schoolwork, sports practice, grocery shopping, laundry, and cooking, eating and cleaning meals without giving speeches. My mother stated that the divorce had broken her because my father had an affair and that she required space and time for herself and her friends. She refused to sit at home alone and stated that she deserved a life. When I stayed with her, she would leave in the evening, and I would keep an eye on my 4-year-old brother. I would go over a list of everything he required for the next day, move laundry from the machine to the dryer, lay out clothes, prepare food, and check his and my backpacks. By the time I was 14, I didn't need to be ordered to do anything because no one else in the apartment was going to go through the checklist. My brother was 10 and required rides, papers, signatures, lunches, clean clothes, and someone to ensure he slept at night. Our mother would text from the bars, saying she'd be back soon, then send another text, and then nothing. I learnt not to wait for her because getting up meant starting the next day with no sleep, then taking an exam or going to practice and attempting to concentrate when my head felt like it was filled with static. So I set alarms, established routines, watched the gate, and jotted down bus numbers, phone numbers, due dates, locker combinations, and notes about when the field trip money needed to be turned in and when the clinic in town was open for Waylands. My father did not disparage our mother, nor did he engage me in his thoughts about what she was doing. I didn't tell him much about nights at her apartment, since I knew if he tried to take action in court, the timetable might not alter, and we'd have to keep performing those exchanges while they argued. I didn't want to be in the thick of a new conflict. He paid the support, showed up, and inquired if everything was good. I answered we were because that answer kept the peace and allowed me to maintain control of the plan I had devised. If people ask me where other adults in our family were during those years, I can tell them they were present but unable to change the situation because the custody order stated what it stated. My mother told them she had it handled, and I was the one handling things, and no one wanted to pull the thread that might unravel the small stability that my plan created. I kept track of food and money by watching pricing, reading shop flyers, and purchasing what I could prepare quickly, and had enough fuel to get us through practice and homework the following day. I learned how to prepare fast foods so that they felt like a meal. And I realized that if I left a pan of rice in the fridge, I could make something presentable when I returned home from a late activity without having to start from scratch. None of this seemed heroic to me, and I don't write anything to sound like I'm searching for compliments. This is exactly what happened, and what I had to do to keep us from having constant emergencies. I missed activities and social gatherings with friends because if I left my brother alone at night, he would be alone. And I understood what it was like to sit in a quiet location and count the minutes. I wouldn't make him do more than he already did. When the topic of moving away for college arose at the conclusion of high school, I told them that I couldn't leave because my brother still required someone to do the work on a daily basis. My father asked if he could seek for more time, and I told him he could try, but I didn't want court battles that might not impact the outcome. We decided that I would take community classes, work nearby, and keep things stable until my brother was back on his feet. I did that, and when he was older, had a license, and spent most nights at our father's house, I moved into a modest apartment with a roommate and began to focus on my own life. I carried habits from those years, but I also began to breathe a little easier since I wasn't watching the door for our mother, or calculating how much money we had left for dinners and school supplies until the next support transfer. Let's fast forward to now. I'm pregnant, and my partner and I organized a baby shower for both sides of my family. I figured we could get through a brief event without revisiting the past, because the focus would be on the baby, diapers, bottles, and gear, as well as who would handle food that day. I made it plain to the buddy who hosted that we did not want speeches, toasts, or activities that required a microphone. We set a small time frame, and everyone were fine for the majority of the event. My parents were in the same room without speaking, which was good because the goal wasn't to reconcile them, but to get through the occasion without incident. Near the end, my mother joined a group and began telling a story about raising 2 children on her alone and how difficult it was after my father cheated and abandoned her. She repeated it in a clear voice, looked around at everyone, and kept going. My father was within earshot but did not say anything. I watched people listen and nod, And I knew that if I remained silent, I would be co-signing a narrative of my life that excludes many nights, a lot of work, and a great deal of support from my father. The math in my thoughts was quick and straightforward. I either interrupt and state unequivocally that the story is incorrect, or I let it sit and then correct versions of it in smaller rooms for years. I chose the first choice and said clearly that I raised myself and my brother during her time, and that my father did not forsake us, paying support and showing up. I said, if people want to know who cooked, signed forms, handled pickups, called the bus line, sat in clinics, met teachers, and made sure there was food, they can talk to me. I said I would not let my child grow up believing a story that gives credit to someone who did not do the work. My mother told me I was ungrateful and that I was embarrassing her. She left the gathering with her friends and didn't talk with me for 2 weeks. She wrote me a message the day after the shower, saying I had crossed a boundary and that she would not speak to me until I apologized. I did not respond to that message because an apology for stating the truth would put me back, and I wanted to focus my attention on the delivery and setting up support that would function during those initial weeks. I prepared a visit schedule and informed both parties that visits might be abbreviated by arrangement, that we would not host drop-ins, and that no photos of the infant would be posted without our permission. My father said he understood and asked if we needed anything else. My mother responded with nothing but quiet. About a week before my due date, my mother requested that we meet near her home. She explained that she had thought about the shower and could see how her remarks were incorrect. She claimed that she left us unsupervised on many nights and used bars and friends to deal with the divorce and affair. She stated that she was depressed, felt empty, and shut down, and that hanging out with pals at bars saved her from sitting alone. She stated that she should have sought therapy but did not due to cost and fear of being judged. She asked for the opportunity to be a present grandmother and create trust. I told her that while I accept her awareness of conduct, I will not rewrite history, and that if she wants a position, it will be established on tiny, consistent behaviors over time. I told her I would not be her therapist or health manager, and that if she felt she needed help she should seek it from specialists. I established clear guidelines for visits and stated that if she broke them, we would pause. She claimed she understood and cried, and I didn't rush to make her feel better because I'm no longer doing that job. My father dropped over with a bag of goods and asked if I wanted to discuss what had happened. I informed him about the cafe chat, and he said he felt ashamed in the shower because he knew his affair set off the chain of events that led to the divorce. He apologized for not pushing harder long ago when he thought that things were not stable at my mother's house. He expressed concern that a legal fight would fail, causing us to lose time with him and even destroying our lives. We sat down, and I told him that I don't want to revisit prior decisions every time something happens, and that I need him to focus on what we need right now. He stated he would and requested me to notify him if he begins to overfunction or push too hard out of guilt. I appreciated it since it pointed to a pattern I don't want to repeat in which emotions drive behaviors that result in additional work for me. The baby shower prompted inquiries from family members who had heard 2 distinct accounts of the past over the years. I informed them that I'm not attempting to punish my mother, absolve my father, or rank them. I'm interested in creating a baseline for my child based on actual behavior that will keep our family free of disruption and blame stories. I informed them that I am open to individuals who show up but close to those who do not. And I added that if somebody attempts to force me into a reconciliation arc to make themselves feel better, they should stop because I am not doing that work for others. So I provided an update. People messaged me to ask what occurred shortly after the shower, if my brother reached out, and if there was any fallout. My brother called me 2 days after the incident and said he froze when our mother was speaking and wished he had stepped in with a brief message of support to end the conversation right there. He said he emailed her that night that he agreed with me, that he remembered many evenings when I was in charge, and that he would not sit through future speeches that allocate credit in a way that ignores the work I accomplished. He requested me to provide him a list of the postpartum boundaries I established so that he could reinforce them if anyone tried to push over them while I was fatigued or unavailable. I provided him the timetable, as well as the guidelines regarding brief visits, consent for photos, and no posts. And he said he would support me in any room. In terms of consequences, cousins asked my mother if she wanted to explain her side, and she said she was tired of dealing with ungrateful children. One cousin sent me a long note about how my mother's divorce had left her with fewer finances and that going to bars for social support was typical. I stated that while social support is not a problem, leaving children alone night after night is, and that I will not address that anymore. My father did not contact my mother or ask me to communicate with her on his behalf. He limited his comments to practical advice and let the social aspect fall where it would. I believe this helped to avoid me from being forced into the go-between role, which I do not want to continue in this next stage of my life. In the week following the shower, I finalized our plans for the birth and the first 2 weeks at home. My husband and I devised a simple system that included meal drop-offs on specific days and quiet days with no visits, as well as a list of duties that people might perform if they asked how to help. We put it all down since word of mouth spreads quickly, and when people are in the room, they frequently default to holding the baby and chatting when what we really need is dishes, laundry, garbage, and someone to pick up a card or a prescription. We communicated the plan to both parties and adhered to it. People who followed the plan were invited back, while those who did not received fewer windows. It was not a punishment. It was a means to keep a tiny unit safe throughout a difficult stage. After the meeting, my mother sent texts stating that she would respect the rules I established, including not bringing friends, making speeches, or sharing images. I asked her to affirm that she would arrive and depart on time, and that she would inquire before taking up the infant. She said yes. I avoided lengthy discussions since they frequently devolve into old grudges that consume hours and yield nothing useful. I wanted to preserve every interaction with her related to specific activities that I could consider later. Then the birth occurred. Labor proceeded as predicted, with the typical range of discomfort, decisions, monitoring, and checks. We kept the hospital room quiet and did not accept drop-in visitors. My father arrived during visiting hours, sat and held the baby, asked if I needed anything specific, and then went to my house to get some things in order. My mother arrived the next day during her assigned window, bringing a little bag of diapers and wipes, as well as a brief message in which she expressed her desire to do better in the future. She asked to hold the baby, and I said yes. She sat and held the baby, not talking about the past, the shower, or my father, and did not take out her phone without asking. After 20 minutes, she returned the baby and said she'd leave so I could rest. This was the first time in many years that I didn't feel like I was attempting to control her attitude or guide the room around her needs. We went home and began our schedule. People arrived and left at predetermined times and completed particular chores. We kept a log on the fridge where we recorded feeding times, diaper counts, medications, and tasks. This was useful because when someone asked how we could help, we could refer to the list rather than thinking up tasks on the fly while carrying a wailing baby. My mother arrived to our house during her allotted hours and inquired what she could do. I told her to fold the laundry, wash the bottles and wipe the surfaces, which she did. She did not modify our routines, give unsolicited advice, or attempt to take over the infant. She set a timer on her phone and departed as soon as it went off. I documented each good visit because I want to evaluate based on data, not hope. Update 2. Another update because folks asked if I would go to therapy with my mother, push her into treatment, or help manage her health. I informed my mother that if she wanted to pursue treatment, I would provide her the names of therapists and a link to an intake portal. That was the extent of my engagement. I provided her a short list that matched her insurance and asked her to let me know if she had scheduled anything. And she could keep it private if she wanted to. She texted around 2 weeks later that she had completed an intake and attended her first session, and that it was difficult to sit with comments on her patterns. She stated that the therapist asked her to describe how she coped after the divorce and how it affected us, and she could see that she told herself a story in which she regarded herself as the key source of our survival, even if the facts did not support that. I told her I heard her and will watch what she did next. I also established a guideline regarding childcare. For the time being, only my father, brother, and 2 close friends can handle the infant on their own. My mother is welcome to pay me visits and assist with tasks when I am present. If she maintains consistency for several months, we can return. She acknowledged her understanding and asked if she might take the stroller for a short walk with me present. I agreed to a loop around the block while we were together, which we did, and it was fine. She didn't press for more, which I appreciated because it would have set us back. Money came up since my mother volunteered to help. I suggested she put up a little monthly transfer into the account we made for the baby's future. I asked her not to acquire goods without coordination because space and procedures are more important than random items. She agreed and scheduled a transfer, bringing consumables rather than huge stuff. During visits, she sometimes reads from a book while I rest, which is more useful than elaborate gestures. I prefer assistance that fits within our plan. Regarding my father, I informed him openly that I did not want him to grade my mother on a curve because of his guilt over the affair. I instructed him not to overemphasize fundamental obedience or to talk about her improvement in a way that puts pressure on me to respond with thanks. He stated that he understands and keeps his comments focused on tasks. He also stays away from any communication with her so that I am not triangulated. He focuses on running errands, taking rides, and making minor repairs around our house that are important on a daily basis. When he does something, he records it on the board and then moves on. This keeps our relationships tidy and effective. Questions arose regarding whether I should maintain relationships with extended family members who hold strong beliefs about what transpired. And some of them advised me to forgive quickly because life is short. I informed them that I am not conducting a forgiveness contest and will not be ticking down the days until a deadline. I am managing a household with a newborn and attempting to establish a sane rhythm. Anyone who assists is welcome during this season, but anyone who causes friction is not. I am explicit in text and in person, and I do not fight after I have laid out the rules. People adjust or cease coming. I'm fine with both results. Update 3 is the third update, because a test of the new regulations arose during a naming ceremony at my partner's family home, where both of my parents were invited for a brief while. My partner's family wanted a small gathering where a few relatives may sit for a while and provide words of encouragement before sharing a meal and heading home. We communicated the same regulations and timeframes for visits and stated up front that there would be no speeches from my parents or toasts to the past. My mother asked if she might offer a blessing for a minute, and I told her that we don't do open mics and that she should save any words for her own time. On the day of the occasion, she arrived on time and sat in the back, helping plate food rather than attempting to join groups with my in-laws to retell history. My father arrived on time and sat beside my brother, staying in his lane as well. Halfway through the celebration, one of my partner's family members complimented both of my parents for raising me. I felt a slight push from the audience toward a familiar arc in which people stare at the elderly and wait for a response. My mother began to speak and I looked at her and shook my head once, saying, "We are keeping this focused on the baby." She paused and sat back down. My father remained quiet. The event has moved on. This may seem insignificant, but for us it was a moment when an old pattern could have seized the wheel but did not. Another test came a week later, when my mother arrived 15 minutes late for a scheduled appointment and then requested to stay until the end time to make up her minutes. I said no, because the end time is important for naps, feedings, and sanity. She said that traffic was the reason and requested me to be accommodating. I mentioned that life has traffic, and the rule is based on start and end periods. If she wants extra time, she can demonstrate that she can meet start times over numerous visits, and we can then consider minor adjustments. She departed on time and didn't push. That was also a data point I noted, because follow-through is more important than promising to do better next time. People have inquired if I intend to rebuild a closer relationship with my mother beyond these scheduled meetings. I'm not making any guarantees regarding that because I no longer base my relationships on hope. I run them based on their conduct over time. I will add that I have witnessed tiny steps. She has kept her hands busy with household activities without seeking praise. She has not expressed a desire to upload images. She hasn't repeated the shower story. She's started therapy. She's avoided disputes with my father. These are the steps. I can notice them while maintaining my limits. My brother has taken on the position of uncle in a way that indicates he is ready to put his parentified role behind. He comes by on weekends and runs the errands I assign. He cooks a pot of food, organizes containers, and labels them, saving us time for days. He holds the infant and follows instructions, and he instructs me to sleep while he does the dishes and cleans the space. I told him that seeing him in this role without the previous weight on his shoulders is something I'll never forget. He stated he feels the same way and is delighted we can have a family moment without carrying someone else's obligations. Readers have asked if I will ever accept my mother's apology as adequate. My response is that apologies don't mean anything to me until they are followed up on over time. I'm not tallying points, but I am tracking behavior because I've discovered that without tracking, I end myself in a cloud of emotions. And this brings me back to performing labor for others. I'm not doing that anymore. And I will not raise my child in that fog. I'll maintain our home on a predictable path, and everybody who wants in will fit in. Now, because this is Reddit and people ask for judgment, I'll pose a question. I don't require a label of right or wrong, but I could appreciate feedback on a number of upcoming decisions. One is whether to allow my mother a brief solo outing with the stroller in the coming weeks if she continues to arrive on time and follow instructions. I'm leaning toward waiting longer since once she leaves the apartment with the baby, I have no control over what she says to anyone she meets or whether she attempts to take a photo and pass it around. I can specify restrictions, but outside the apartment they are more difficult to enforce. I'd rather add extra in-apartment hours before we grow. Another dilemma is if I should invite both of my parents to the same future kid occasions, such as birthdays or school activities, or alternate. My tendency is to alternate for a while, because shared activities invite speeches, narratives, and sideways comments, which I prefer to avoid during the early years. Update 4. 2 months passed, And my mother maintained her therapy schedule based on what she decided to communicate, and she arrived at the majority of her appointments on time. She missed 2 and gave notice on 1, but not the other. I did not reschedule the missed appointment without notice and pushed the following window by a week as a logical consequence, because my time is not an open slot that others can fill or drop as they choose. She accepted it without protest, and on subsequent visits, she arrived early and waited in her car until the start time, which I saw as evidence that she understood the rules. Inside the flat, she continued to assign duties and avoided baby management until I specifically requested it. She tried to adjust the swaddling once, and I told her to stop so she did not try again. One event threw a knot in the plan, and it was the first time I had to make a hard stop. At a family dinner outside of our home, my mother began telling the person sitting next to her that she did what she needed to do to survive after the divorce, and that people do not realize the cost of betrayal. I heard something from across the room and stood up, walked over, and told them that this topic was off bounds and that if it continued, we would leave. She claimed she was simply making conversation. I stated that this discourse breaches the rule that history should not be told in public areas. I took my partner and the baby and we departed after saying our goodbyes to the host. I emailed my mother later that visits had been suspended for 2 weeks and that one more incident like that would put her back at 0. The next day, she apologized and promised not to do it again. When the pause ended, she proceeded to the next window and followed the guidelines. My father adhered to the plan without incident. He has not used my mother's actions to make a judgment about who is better or worse. He has not requested greater access than we can provide within this time frame. He has not attempted to make atonement in years past with extravagant gestures that result in more effort. He keeps it steady, which is exactly what I need from him. He once began to express regret over the affair during a visit when I was feeding the baby. I told him I didn't have the time to tackle that matter and that we could talk about it later if he needed to. He replied, "No problem," and began washing bottles. That was the end of it. I've had to remind a few relatives to stop asking me to appear in the same photo as both of my parents. I don't do that. I take separate images and do not post them, nor do I allow others to. When people request a good family photo for memories, I tell them that my priority is my child's schedule, not their photo album. I don't apologize. I state it honestly and move on. The fewer words I use, the better, because arguments expand in empty space.